My name is Andrea Kate, and this is how my life was shattered. It all started on a cold, stormy night, the kind where the wind howls like a warning and the sky cracks with the weight of a brewing storm. I was a first-year engineering student at Rosewood University, a secluded campus on the outskirts of the city, where ambition and competition thrived in equal measure. I had worked tirelessly to earn a scholarship that would secure my future. It wasn't just a ticket to education, it was the lifeline I'd fought for my entire life. One that would pull me out of the shadow of financial struggle and give me a chance to build a better future for myself and my family. My roommate, Benjamin Ben Green, seemed like a perfect match. A pre-med student from a wealthy family, he exuded charm and confidence, and his presence in the room made everything feel more vibrant. He was the kind of person who could light up a room with a smile, and I couldn't help but admire his strength and social ease. In the beginning, Ben felt like a brother, someone I could rely on for support. We spent late nights studying together, sharing secrets, and swapping dreams about our futures. There was an unspoken bond between us that I believed would never be broken. But the darkness began to creep in slowly. Ben started asking more probing questions about my scholarship, how much I had, what I used it for, how much of it I still had left. At first, I brushed it off, thinking nothing of it. But when I noticed small things going wrong, unexpected charges appearing on my student account, discrepancies in the amounts I had been budgeting, it all started to add up. Ben, the guy I trusted with my most personal secrets, had been siphoning off my scholarship funds. I confronted him late one night, the flickering candlelight casting shadows on the walls, reflecting the cold fury in my eyes. His expression was one of disbelief, not because he was caught, but because he never thought I would find out. He had stolen my future, and in return, he gave me nothing but lies and broken trust. It hit me harder than any storm ever could. The betrayal cut deep, like a jagged knife, leaving me cold and empty inside. But instead of breaking down, something shifted within me. The rage, the humiliation, and the unfairness of it all twisted into something more. I wasn't just going to let him get away with this. Ben had taken from me, and now I would take it all back, along with something he could never see coming. I had been naive to trust him, but now I would be ruthless. I would make him regret ever crossing me. My life before everything changed had a rhythm I cherished. I was a quiet, determined student, always focused on my studies. But there were people who brought light into the dark corners of my world. My parents were my anchor. They were both hardworking immigrants who never stopped believing that education was the key to a better life. They sacrificed so much for me to be here, and their faith in me fueled my every decision. My mother would often call late at night, just to remind me how proud they were. I would hear her voice, filled with so much love, and it would give me the strength to keep going. Then there was my best friend Lucy. She had been with me since high school, and although we had both come from humble beginnings, her infectious optimism made everything feel possible. We shared the same dreams, the same struggles, and for the most part, the same fears. Lucy was the one I confided in most. When I first moved into the dorm, I remember telling her how grateful I was for my scholarship, how it meant everything to me. I remember her laughter, the way she reassured me that everything would be fine. "You've earned this, Andrea. You're going to do great things," she had said, her smile full of unwavering support. But things began to change once I roomed with Ben. At first, everything seemed perfect. Ben was charming, someone who had a natural way of making people feel comfortable around him. He always had this air of confidence, and it was clear he had the attention of everyone he met. I couldn't help but be drawn to his charisma. Slowly, Ben became someone I relied on, someone I felt I could trust, someone who was supposed to be my friend. I found myself opening up to him, telling him about my struggles with the scholarship, my fears of not being able to balance everything. He'd always listen with a knowing nod, offering words of encouragement that made me feel like everything was under control. And yet, looking back, I realize now how naive I was. I had allowed Ben to get too close. What started as genuine friendship turned into a manipulation I never saw coming. My connection with him was the very thing that made the betrayal so much worse. It wasn't just money he stole from me. It was my trust, my belief in the goodness of people. The hardest part was realizing that the one person I had opened up to, the one I had considered family, had deceived me in the worst possible way. It all came crashing down on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, the day that I thought would be like any other. I was sitting in the campus library, buried under stacks of notes, trying to prepare for an exam when I received the email notification. It was a routine email, one that I had been waiting for, the confirmation of my scholarship renewal for the next semester. With a quick tap of my fingers, I opened the email, expecting to see the familiar congratulatory message. But instead, my heart stopped as I read the words. The scholarship that had been my lifeline, the scholarship that kept me afloat in this expensive world of academia, was revoked. The reason? Failure to comply with funding terms. Panic gripped me as I reread the email over and over, trying to make sense of it. How could this be? I had followed every rule, every deadline. I checked my financial aid account, my application status, every detail, and then I saw it. The fraudulent charges. Someone had redirected my funds. Someone had taken what was mine, and it wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate. In that instant, everything began to unravel. I felt a knot tighten in my chest, the suffocating realization creeping over me. I knew who had done it. There was only one person who had access to my personal information, Ben. I rushed back to the dorm, my hands shaking, my mind racing. When I arrived, Ben was sitting in the common area, as if nothing had changed, as if everything was still normal. The casual way he greeted me made my stomach churn. But I couldn't speak. The words felt lodged in my throat. Instead, I went to my desk and pulled out my bank statements, my scholarship paperwork, everything I had left to prove the truth. And there on the screen was the glaring evidence. Ben had transferred my scholarship funds to an account I didn't recognize. I couldn't breathe. Ben, I whispered, my voice trembling, the weight of the betrayal settling like 1,000 pounds on my chest. His eyes met mine, but there was no remorse, no regret. Only coldness. You, I gasped. You took it. His smirk was the last thing I saw before the anger flooded my veins. You think I was going to let you have all the success? You always had it easy, Andrea. Scholarships, parents who supported you. I've worked harder than you ever have, and yet you get everything. You think I didn't deserve it? His words hit me like a slap in the face, each one deeper than the last. It wasn't just about money. It was about the resentment that had festered, the jealousy that he had hidden behind his charm and false friendship. I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. My hands were clenched into fists. My mind was numb. The person I had trusted, the person I thought was my friend, had been plotting my downfall all along. The shock of the betrayal threatened to break me, but something else surged within me. Anger, and a burning need for justice. In the days that followed, I was consumed by a whirlwind of emotions: anger, confusion, hurt, each one more suffocating than the last. The betrayal had cut so deep that I couldn't even sleep. My thoughts constantly circled back to Ben, to the shock of what he had done. Every time I tried to focus on anything else, his face would appear in my mind, that cold, unrepentant expression etched into my memory. It felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me, and I was left stumbling in the dark, searching for something to hold on to. I had trusted him. We had been friends for years, but in an instant, all that trust was shattered. I kept replaying that confrontation over and over in my head, wondering if I had missed some sign, some hint of his resentment. How had I been so blind to his jealousy? I had always believed that we were equals, that we were both striving for the same things: success, stability, recognition. But it wasn't enough for him. It never had been. I had been so focused on my goals that I never stopped to think about how my success might make him feel. And now, because of my ignorance, I was facing the consequences. I could feel my world slipping through my fingers, my future hanging by a thread. I spent the next few days in isolation, avoiding friends and classes, retreating into my own thoughts. The weight of it all felt unbearable. My scholarship was gone, my finances were in ruins, and all because of someone I had trusted with everything. I didn't know who I was anymore. The person who had worked so hard to build a future was now broken, and the anger that simmered beneath the surface threatened to consume me. How could I forgive him? How could I let him get away with this? It was in the quiet solitude of my dorm room, surrounded by my scattered thoughts, that I received a message from Maya. I hadn't spoken to her in days, but somehow she knew something was wrong. When I opened her text, it was simple. We need to talk. Meet me outside the cafe in 10. I didn't know why, but I immediately agreed. Maya had always been the voice of reason in my life, the one who could cut through the chaos and offer clarity when I needed it the most. She had watched me grow, had been there for all the highs and lows, and now she was here to offer her perspective on this. As I sat across from her, the warmth of the cafe offering some comfort against the cold bitterness that had settled in my heart, I saw the concern in her eyes. "You don't have to carry this burden alone, you know," she said softly, her voice filled with empathy. "I know it's hard to even think about, but you have to let it go. Then is not worth your peace." Her words struck me like a jolt of electricity. Part of me wanted to believe her, to let go of the anger that had taken root inside me. But another part of me, the part that had been wronged so deeply, refused to let it go. But he ruined my future, Maya. He took something that I worked so hard for. How can I just forgive him? I felt the tears welling up as the emotions I had been holding inside flooded to the surface. The sense of betrayal was still so raw, so fresh. Maya's expression softened, and she reached across the table to take my hand. "I get it, Andrea, I really do. But revenge isn't going to make you feel better. It might give you a temporary rush, but it won't fix what's been broken. If you keep holding on to this anger, it will consume you. I've seen it happen." Her words lingered in the air between us, a bitter truth I didn't want to acknowledge. For the first time, I realized that Maya was right. I wasn't just angry at Ben. I was angry at myself for being naive, for letting someone like him get so close. The betrayal wasn't just about the money or the scholarship. It was about the trust I had placed in him, the belief that I had been an equal, when in reality, he had always seen me as competition. "Do you really want to become someone like him?" Maya asked quietly, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Someone driven by jealousy and greed, willing to tear others down to get ahead. Because that's who Ben is. You don't want to become him. You have to decide if you want to be better than him." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had always prided myself on being different, on working hard and earning my success. The thought of sinking to Ben's level, of becoming someone who let bitterness and revenge dictate their every move, was unbearable. But that didn't mean I could just forgive him and move on. I was still in pain, still reeling from the betrayal. The question was, what was I going to do about it? Could I rise above it all, or would I let the darkness consume me too? As Maya continued to speak, I felt a shift inside me. Maybe revenge wasn't the answer. Maybe, just maybe, there was another way to reclaim what I had lost. And in that moment, I made a choice, not just for Ben, but for me. I would find a way to rebuild my life, to move forward, but I would do it on my terms, not his. And if I had to fight for it, then I would. But this time, I would do it differently. This time, I would be the one who decided my fate. I spent weeks in a haze of anger, confusion, and hurt. But as I slowly came to terms with the reality of Ben's betrayal, something inside me shifted. The victim inside me started to fade, replaced by a woman who was no longer willing to sit back and let life dictate her future. No, I was going to take control. I wasn't going to let Ben destroy everything I had worked for. I would make him pay for what he had done. And I would do it on my terms. The plan started forming in my mind almost immediately. The scholarship he had stolen from me wasn't just about the money. It was the symbol of everything I had worked so hard to achieve. But I knew the first step was to get Ben to underestimate me. He thought he had won, that I was broken and defeated. He couldn't be more wrong. I started by reconnecting with the people who had helped me get into the program in the first place, professors, mentors, and even students who had supported me. It was subtle at first, nothing too obvious. I wanted Ben to think I was wallowing in my defeat, not plotting revenge. But the wheels were in motion, and slowly, I began to put my plan into action. I knew that if I wanted to take Ben down, I needed to hit him where it hurt the most, his reputation. He had always prided himself on being the golden boy of the department, the star student everyone looked up to. It was easy to see why he had thought he could get away with what he had done. But Ben was cocky, and his arrogance would be his downfall. I began collecting evidence of his past misdeeds. It wasn't just the scholarship theft. There were rumors of him manipulating grades, lying to get internships, and even stealing credit for others' work. Each piece of information was like a puzzle fitting together. The more I dug, the more I found, and the more I realized that Ben's reputation wasn't just fragile, it was built on lies. I couldn't wait to expose him for what he really was, a fraud. But the challenges were many. Ben wasn't a fool. He had his own network of people who would cover for him. I had to be careful. One wrong move, and he could turn the tables on me, making it look like I was the one in the wrong. I needed to plan every step meticulously. There were also the ethical dilemmas. Would I be willing to stoop to his level in order to take him down? I couldn't let my anger cloud my judgment. I had to be smarter than him. I would expose him for the liar and cheater he was, but I wouldn't let him turn me into someone I didn't want to be. I spent countless nights alone in my room, drafting emails, strategizing my next move, and rehearsing what I would say. I needed Ben to believe that I was completely defeated, that I had no idea of the storm that was about to hit him. The moment would come when I would deliver the evidence to the right people, people who could ruin his academic career with a single decision. But even with everything coming together, there were still moments of doubt. Was this the right thing to do? Was I letting my thirst for revenge consume me? I had to remind myself that this wasn't just about getting back at him. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming what he had stolen from me and showing the world that people like him could never get away with their lies and deceit. With every obstacle, I became more determined. I had learned from my mistakes, and I was no longer the naive student who trusted everyone around her. I was a woman on a mission, and nothing would stop me. Ben had no idea what was coming. But by the time he did, it would be too late. The day had come. Everything I had planned for weeks, all the small details, the quiet meetings, the subtle manipulations, were about to culminate in one explosive moment. I had carefully constructed my revenge, ensuring that each step aligned perfectly. Ben wouldn't see it coming. He never would. But even as I set everything in motion, a sense of unease crept up on me. Was I really ready for this? The thrill of executing my plan mixed with a growing sense of doubt. What if it all backfired? What if the cost was too high? I started with the most delicate part of my plan, leaking the first piece of evidence. It was an anonymous email sent to one of the department heads, hinting at the unethical practices Ben had been involved in. I could already hear the whispers beginning. The faculty meeting that followed was intense. I watched from the back of the room as Ben sat there, nervously flipping through his notes, clearly unaware of the storm heading his way. It was almost too easy. He had become so confident in his position, believing no one would dare challenge him. But as the meeting progressed, the first cracks in his facade began to show. That's when I saw it, the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his phone. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. I could sense his panic, and it felt exhilarating. My plan was working, but as the meeting dragged on, I began to question how far I was willing to take this. I had never intended for it to go this far, but now there was no turning back. As the days went by, the consequences of my actions unfolded in unexpected ways. Ben's reputation began to unravel as more people started to question his integrity. It didn't take long for rumors about his manipulations and deceit to spread. Students stopped asking for his help, professors grew distant, and Ben's once golden boy status started to crumble. But even as I watched the walls close in on him, there was a nagging feeling in my chest. Was I turning into someone I didn't recognize? Then came the real twist. Ben reached out to me. It was a text message, a simple plea. I know what you're doing. It's not too late to stop. You'll ruin everything. For a moment I hesitated. Part of me felt sorry for him, seeing how much he was scrambling. But then, I reminded myself of the years he had stolen from me, the opportunity he had taken. I couldn't stop now. The final piece of my plan was in motion. I had gathered all the evidence I needed, and the moment Ben finally confronted me, I would expose him in front of the entire department. I had already tipped off the head of the faculty that a formal investigation would be underway. As the final confrontation loomed, I found myself standing at a precipice. Ben's desperation and my own desire for justice tangled within me, creating an emotional whirlpool. I had become so focused on my revenge, I was unsure if I would even feel satisfaction when it was all over. Would it be worth it? Would I be free of this weight, or would it follow me forever? The day of the confrontation arrived sooner than I had expected, but somehow it felt like I had been waiting for this moment forever. Ben had made his move. He had called a meeting with me, requesting a face-to-face talk. His message was clear, though. He knew the walls were closing in. He was desperate, and I could hear it in his voice as he insisted we meet privately. I had anticipated this, but now that the moment was here, I could hardly breathe. The room where we met was dimly lit, the tension thick in the air. Ben's usually confident, collected demeanor had crumbled into something almost unrecognizable. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for mercy, his voice strained as he spoke. "Andrea, I know it was you. But this isn't the way to handle things. I've already lost everything. You've won. Just stop before it goes too far." For a brief second, my heart wavered. A part of me, maybe the part that was still holding onto the version of Ben I had once trusted, wanted to show him mercy. But then the memory of the sleepless nights, the humiliation, the years of stolen opportunities hit me like a wave. Ben had taken something irreplaceable from me. His betrayal was not a momentary lapse in judgment. It was calculated, cold, and ruthless. And now, as he stood before me, there was nothing left of the friendship we once had, nothing but ashes. "Lost everything?" I repeated, my voice low and steady. "You're only starting to understand what it feels like. You destroyed me, Ben. Do you think I don't know that?" I could feel the rage building in my chest. Every word that left my mouth a release of everything I had been holding in for so long. "You took something from me that I'll never get back. And now you want me to show mercy? After everything?" Ben flinched, the weight of my words hitting him like a physical blow. He stepped forward, his face a mask of desperation. "I was wrong. I was stupid. His words faltered as I stood my ground, unwavering. I had spent too long calculating this moment, preparing for it. There was no turning back. I had to make a choice. I reached into my bag, pulling out a file that contained all the damning evidence. The emails, the falsified signatures, the proof of his embezzlement. The truth was laid out in black and white, and I had the power to bring it all crashing down. Ben's eyes widened when he saw what I held, his face draining of color. I had him. "You've been playing everyone, Ben," I said, coldly flipping through the papers. "And now it's time for the world to know who you really are." His knees buckled, and for the first time in years, I saw Ben. The real Ben. The man who had been hiding behind his lies, his arrogance. He was broken, just as I had been. The man who had once been my mentor, my friend, was now reduced to a shell of himself. As I stood there, looking down at him, I felt no satisfaction, only emptiness. The revenge I had worked so hard for had arrived, but in its wake, I felt no triumph, only a strange sense of hollowness. The years of bitterness, the pain I had carried, didn't vanish with this victory. Instead, it lingered, reminding me that revenge, no matter how sweet, never heals the wound, it only deepens it. Ben's voice trembled as he spoke. "You'll destroy everything, your career, your reputation. Is it really worth it?" I took a deep breath, standing tall. I could see the fear in his eyes. But I wasn't moved. "It was worth it," I whispered, but even as I spoke the words, I knew I wasn't sure. In the weeks that followed the confrontation with Ben, the weight of everything I had done settled heavily on my shoulders. The evidence was out there now, and Ben's career had collapsed under the truth. He was facing legal action, his reputation destroyed, and there was no denying the extent of his betrayal. But as I watched everything unfold, something inside me began to shift. At first, I thought I would feel relief, even triumph. But instead there was a profound emptiness. The justice I had sought so fiercely didn't bring the peace I had imagined. I spent long nights in my apartment, replaying every moment of my plan, wondering if it had all been worth it. Ben had paid for his sins, but the satisfaction I thought would come with revenge never arrived. Instead, I felt drained, hollow. The truth had been exposed, but in the process, I had lost pieces of myself too. I knew then that I had been driven by anger, by the need to prove something to myself. And while the world saw me as victorious, I had become a stranger to my own heart. The emotional fallout wasn't just Ben's, it was mine too. I had allowed myself to be consumed by the desire for retribution, and now I had to face the cost of my actions. But the journey had not been entirely in vain. I had learned something about strength, true strength, not the kind that comes from manipulating others or seeking revenge, but the kind that arises from letting go. I realized that my greatest battle wasn't with Ben, but with the version of myself I had become. I had to stop being defined by my pain, by the betrayal that had once ruled my life. I decided to take control, not of Ben's fate, but of my own. I reached out to colleagues I had lost touch with, people I could trust, people who saw the real me before everything had gone wrong. With their support, I found a way to rebuild my career. One that no longer revolved around shadows of the past, but on the future I could shape with my own hands. I also made amends with the people who had been hurt by my obsession with revenge, including Maya. She had stayed by my side through everything, even when I had pushed her away. And as I apologized for my actions and the emotional distance I had created, I found that forgiveness wasn't something I needed from others. It was something I needed to give to myself. Looking back, I could see that my pursuit of revenge had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I had learned the hard way that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, is an endless cycle that leaves you empty in the end. It's not the world that needs to change. It's the way we choose to move forward in the face of betrayal. And as I stood at the edge of a new chapter, I realized that I wasn't the woman I had been when I first started this journey. I was stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The lessons I had learned about justice, power, and forgiveness would guide me now, not in my quest for vengeance, but in my quest for peace. My journey hadn't ended with Ben's fall. It had begun anew with me. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace what came next.